If you opened your wallet today and looked at the habits you follow without thinking, saving a little for later, comparing prices, trusting familiar shops, budgeting, carefully recording what you spend, you might feel certain these ideas are modern. Yet many of them quietly began centuries ago, in markets lit by lanterns, in small wooden shops, in noisy town squares paved with uneven stones, and in the patient routines of people who handled every coin with intention. Tonight on Boring History for Sleep, we drift back into the medieval world, where money was not merely currency, but a daily rhythm. People counted coins by touch, stored savings in simple containers, kept mental ledgers, traded fairly, avoided unnecessary risk, supported trusted sellers, and made careful decisions shaped by experience rather than abundance. Many of those practical habits, so familiar today that we barely notice them, were shaped long before banks, credit cards, or digital payments existed. Before we begin this calm journey through forgotten financial customs, remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about a money habit you follow without knowing where it came from. Your support keeps these peaceful stories alive. Now, settle in, breathe softly, and let the quiet history of everyday life unfold. Before banks' calculators or printed charts existed, before money apps told us how much we spent or how much we saved, medieval people relied on something far simpler and far more human: the slow, steady, mindful act of counting by hand. Today, we sort our cash into categories, count coins, check amounts, double-check sums, and even instinctively feel when something seems off. These habits, so ordinary that we barely think about them, grew naturally from a medieval world where every coin was touched, weighed, examined, and valued individually. To understand how deeply these early money habits shaped modern life, imagine yourself standing in a medieval marketplace at the beginning of a calm morning. The sun is still soft, warming the stones beneath your feet. Shops are opening, shutters creaking as merchants lift them. Cloth stalls flutter gently in the breeze. Bakers slide warm loaves onto tables. The air carries a mixture of quiet voices and the smell of freshly ground grain. In this world, money is not abstract. It is physical, carried in small purses, heavy enough to remind you of its presence. Each coin represents effort, days of work, harvested crops, crafted goods, or completed services. Here, counting is essential. A person buying a loaf of bread reaches into their pouch and touches the coins one by one. They feel the ridges, the thickness, the slight imperfections. They know the value of each coin not by printed numbers, but by weight, size, and experience. A merchant accepts the coins, calmly counts them again, then counts change to return. This double-checking is not mistrustful. It is simply a shared habit. Just as we today check our receipts or recount change out of instinct, medieval people repeated this pattern countless times each day. Because coins were handmade, no two were perfectly alike. Some were slightly lighter, others slightly thicker. A careful person learned to distinguish these differences easily. Their fingers became skilled, almost instinctively recognizing whether a coin felt correct. Modern people who enjoy counting change or arranging money neatly may not realize it, but they are echoing a habit developed in marketplaces centuries ago, when sorting coins mattered as much as earning them. Many medieval people did not handle large amounts of money daily, yet they developed remarkable precision in managing the small amounts they had. Counting became a moment of thoughtfulness, a calm pause before making a decision. People counted once before spending, once after, and often again later in the evening when they returned home. They might sit at a wooden table lit by a candle or lantern, lay their coins out neatly, and sort them into small groups. Copper coins in one place, silver coins in another, larger denominations placed carefully apart. Counting provided reassurance, a sense of order, and a moment of reflection after a busy day. This end-of-day ritual mirrors modern habits more closely than we might expect. Today, people check their balance, review expenses, or empty pockets onto a table to see what remains. In essence, the behavior is the same, a quiet, private moment of organization. Counting also carried a social dimension. In markets, people consciously counted coins in front of one another. A buyer might set their coins on the merchant's table slowly, allowing both parties to observe the amount. This transparency built trust. It ensured fairness without arguments or confusion. The steady rhythm of counting together created a respectful exchange. just as cashiers and customers today watch each other count change in a peaceful, cooperative way. Children learned these habits early. Parents taught them to recognize coins by size, weight, and sound. They learned how to place coins in their hand without dropping them, how to count with patience, and how to check totals twice. This gentle education shaped generations of people who approached money not with hurriedness, but with calm attentiveness. Even people who owned little still practiced careful counting. In fact, the less one had, the more important the habit became. A farmer selling a basket of apples, a shepherd trading wool, or a carpenter receiving payment for repairs each counted their earnings willingly. These small acts of mindfulness helped them maintain control over their finances long before written accounting became common. Because coins varied and could be worn down, counting sometimes included evaluating condition. Medieval people often held coins up to the light, feeling the edges for sharpness or smoothness. A worn coin still had value, but careful counting allowed them to understand its true worth. This ancient behavior lives on today when people inspect bills for authenticity or feel whether a coin seems unfamiliar. Merchants developed more advanced counting habits. They used wooden boards, sorting trays, and sometimes even simple lines drawn on tables to keep track of amounts. Their fingers moved coins into neat rows, grouping them by tens or twenties. A merchant's counting method was often admired. Some moved coins swiftly but gracefully, with movements so practiced they resembled a quiet art. When large transactions occurred, two merchants frequently counted together, confirming totals with peaceful cooperation. This shared method of counting laid the groundwork for later financial tools. Early bookkeeping practices emerged from these routines. Before ledgers and official notations became common, merchants kept small stones or tokens representing coin amounts, moving them as they counted. Eventually, they recorded totals on parchment or wooden tablets. But the root was always the same: careful, mindful counting. Another habit that never disappeared was the practice of counting money before traveling. Medieval people rarely left home without checking their coins. Whether walking to the market or beginning a long journey, they ensured they had what they needed. Today, people do the same before leaving their homes, checking wallets, pocketing cash, counting bills, a direct continuation of habits shaped by centuries of travel and trade. The sound of coins mattered too. In medieval markets, the clinking of metal created a gentle soundtrack to daily life. People recognized the sound of certain coins by ear. A copper coin had a softer tone than silver, silver softer than gold. Merchants listened for these tones instinctively, just as modern people recognized the distinct sounds of different coins dropping into their hands. Even the way medieval people stored money shaped modern habits. They carried coins in small leather pouches, often tied securely to belts or hidden under clothing. Today, wallets serve the same purpose: compact, organized, protective. Some people even separate bills by denomination or keep coins in specific pockets, echoing ancient tendencies. Over time, medieval counting evolved into a kind of personal practice, blending necessity with mindfulness. People counted money not only to track value, but also to understand their finances in a calm and intimate way. This close relationship with each coin created responsibility. It encouraged thoughtful spending, careful saving, and quiet reflection, habits that still shape financial behavior today. The evening counting ritual deserves special attention. Imagine a medieval household returning from a day's work, settling near the fire. Someone empties their pouch onto the table. The coins scatter softly. They gather them, arrange them, and count slowly. The sounds are gentle. The motions are unhurried. There is no rush, no anxiety, only understanding. This moment becomes a small ceremony of closure, marking the transition from work to rest. Today, people recreate this ritual when they check balances before bed, organize cash, or track expenses, a modern version of an ancient rhythm. Medieval people also counted in anticipation of goals. A person saving for a tool, a garment, or a piece of livestock counted their coins often, imagining how close they were to achieving their aim. Modern people do the same, saving for items with steady planning, evaluating progress through counting or digital balances. In disputes, counting restored peace. If two people disagreed about payment, they laid the coins out and counted together. The coins themselves served as impartial witnesses. This quiet method of conflict resolution still exists today, When people recount bills, check totals, or verify amounts calmly rather than arguing blindly. Finally, counting shaped medieval people's understanding of value. The time spent handling each coin made money feel tangible and meaningful. Spending was thoughtful because counting took effort. Saving felt rewarding because the coins accumulated visibly, audibly, physically, a contrast to modern money, which often feels weightless and abstract. Yet, even today, the ancient sense of value persists. People still enjoy counting cash, still separate coins, still feel comfort in knowing precisely what they have. These instincts come from a world where every coin mattered, where every counting session preserved stability, and where money was understood not as numbers on a screen, but as something real, deliberate, and intimately connected to daily life. This quiet habit, the mindful art of counting, never disappeared. It simply transformed, adapting to new tools and new forms of currency while keeping the same ancient heartbeat. To understand how medieval people saved money, we must begin by imagining life in a world where every coin held unmistakable weight, not only because it was made of metal, but because earning it required real physical effort. A day in the fields, a long shift in a workshop, hours spent carrying goods, mending tools, producing cloth, baking bread, or tending animals. Each task produced coins slowly, carefully, and never in great abundance for most people. Saving, therefore, was not simply a choice. It was a habit of survival, a quiet discipline that shaped entire households. And surprisingly, many of the saving habits that medieval families practiced, setting aside a little at a time, keeping money in separate places, saving for specific goals, and preparing for uncertain days, are the same habits we still follow today, even with modern tools and technologies. To understand these habits deeply, let us drift gently into a medieval home at the end of a long day. The cottage is small, warmed by a fire that crackles softly in the corner. Wooden beams hold the ceiling low and comforting. The air carries the scent of herbs drying near the window. Near the hearth sits a simple wooden box, a cloth pouch, or a clay jar, the family's savings. There is no bank account, no official place to store money. Everything they have must be kept within the home, protected by routine, caution, and habit. Before coins are placed inside this container, they go through a familiar ritual. Someone empties their pouch at the table. The coins, perhaps only a few, are arranged neatly. Some will be needed tomorrow for bread or grain. Some will go toward repairing a tool or paying for a service. And some, even if just a single coin, will be saved. Savings often began small. A household might set aside one coin each week, or even less, depending on the season. During harvest months or after successful sales, saving became easier. During winter, savings might pause temporarily as households used what they stored to survive the cold months. This natural ebb and flow mirrored the rhythms of the land, tying financial habits to the cycle of seasons. One of the most interesting medieval saving habits was earmarking, the practice of setting aside money specifically for certain purposes. A family might save for a tool that needed replacing a future wedding or celebration, repairs to their home, a piece of livestock, seeds for spring. Unexpected illness or emergency, they stored different goals in different containers. One jar might hold coins for daily expenses, another for long-term savings, another for seasonal needs. This is strikingly similar to modern budgeting envelopes, digital savings buckets, or separate accounts used for specific purposes. This habit emerged naturally, not through formal instruction. In a world without written budgets, the physical separation of coins helped people visualize their progress. They could see savings grow slowly, coin by coin. And because coins were tangible, each small contribution felt meaningful. Today, when people transfer money into savings or move funds into separate categories, they echo this same ancient instinct. The comfort of knowing that something has been set aside, however small. Medieval households also practiced emergency saving, though they did not call it that. Life was unpredictable. Tools broke, animals fell ill, storms damaged crops, and sickness could halt work for weeks. Families who saved even a modest amount safeguarded themselves against such disruptions. A few coins tucked away meant the difference between stability and hardship. People learned these habits early. Children watched parents place coins into jars or boxes. They heard discussions about setting aside a little for market sales. As they grew older, they adopted the same practices, carrying the knowledge with them into adulthood. Even today, many people learn saving habits not from formal financial education, but from the quiet routines they observed in their family homes. Another subtle habit medieval people developed was saving in hidden places. Because there were no secure banks for common families, they created their own systems of protection. Some hid coins under floorboards, wrapped them in cloth and stored them behind beams, or tucked them into hollowed sections of wood. Others buried small amounts in clay pots near the house, marking the spot with a stone only they recognized. This habit of safeguarding money in multiple locations still survives today in the form of home safes, private envelopes, secret drawers, or digital backup accounts. Saving also required patience, a kind of patience shaped not by choice, but by necessity. Large purchases took time. A family saving for a cow, a plow, or a wedding garment might collect coins for years. There was no other option except waiting. But this slow progress taught medieval people to value what they eventually acquired. When the savings finally became enough, the purchase felt meaningful because it represented countless small acts of restraint and intention. This patience is still visible today. People save for months or years for a car, a trip, furniture, or important life events. The satisfaction they feel when reaching their goal mirrors the contentment medieval people felt when opening a container full of coins they had gathered gradually and carefully. Medieval saving habits were tied closely to community. People sometimes formed informal networks of support. A neighbor might lend coins to another during difficult times, knowing that the favor would be returned when circumstances improved. Communities understood that individual stability contributed to collective stability. These early cooperative systems resemble modern lending circles, community funds, or even the mutual trust found in small-scale financial groups around the world. Seasonality played an important role. During harvest, when income was more plentiful, families saved more actively. During planting seasons, they used savings to purchase seeds. In winter, savings often kept them warm and fed. This shifting cycle is still alive in modern lives. Bonus seasons, tax returns, periodic pay raises, and seasonal work patterns all influence how people save and spend. One of the most enduring medieval habits was saving for security, not luxury. Today, people save for emergencies, retirement, or children's futures. Medieval people saved with similar motivations: protection, stability, preparation. The mindset was not about accumulating wealth for its own sake, but ensuring that the future felt less uncertain. Even the physical act of saving created comfort. Hearing coins drop into a jar or box brought reassurance. Seeing savings grow slowly brought peace. Today, the digital equivalent, watching a balance increase, brings a similar sense of calm. What is remarkable is how naturally medieval saving habits evolved. No one taught formal financial management. People simply observed life, responded to its unpredictability, and created routines that made sense. Over generations, these routines crystallized into habits so strong that they survived transitions from coins to paper money, from paper to digital systems, from home savings to formal banks. Some wealthier families kept more organized records but still relied on the same principles of setting aside surplus after expenses, planning for future investments, and maintaining multiple reserves. Meanwhile, households with fewer resources relied even more heavily on saving small amounts consistently, understanding that even one coin could create a buffer against hardship. Despite social differences, the core idea remained universal: save what you can, when you can. This idea continues to guide people today. Saving in medieval times was deeply personal. Each family had their own rhythms, methods, hiding places, and priorities. Yet beneath the differences, the same human instinct was at work: the desire to make tomorrow a little more secure than today. This ancient instinct shaped the financial habits we still practice. When we set aside extra cash, round up small amounts into savings, separate funds for different goals, or simply hold on to what remains at the end of a week, we are repeating gestures made by countless people across centuries. Our modern habits, though polished by technology, still carry the quiet wisdom of medieval households. One of the most enduring money habits from medieval life did not begin with coins or savings, but with people, with the simple, human desire to buy from someone you trust. In markets filled with noise, smells, colors, and unfamiliar faces. Medieval households learned early that the safest way to spend money was to return to the same sellers again and again. Over time, these repeated interactions shaped financial behavior so deeply that even today, hundreds of years later, we still follow the same instinct, choosing familiar shops, trusted brands, and reliable sellers over unknown ones. To understand this habit, let us walk slowly into a medieval market at mid-morning. The streets grow busy as the sun rises higher, warming the cobblestones. Wooden stalls line the square, draped with cloth, displaying baskets of vegetables, barrels of fish, wheels of cheese, bolts of fabric, handmade tools, and pottery arranged neatly in rows. Sellers call out gently, not shouting aggressively, but offering greetings to those they recognize. Buyers move deliberately, not rushing, taking time to examine goods carefully. Here, money isn't only exchanged for items, it is exchanged for trust. A woman buying vegetables approaches the same farmer she bought from last week. She doesn't need to inspect every apple with suspicion. She already knows his orchards produce good fruit. He knows she prefers cucumbers that are firm and carrots that are fresh from the soil. There is a familiarity between them that smooths the transaction. She counts her coins calmly. He returns change without hesitation. Both walk away satisfied. This simple moment reveals a habit that never disappeared, the preference for trusted sellers. In the medieval world, this habit developed not because of branding or advertising, but because information traveled slowly. People couldn't check ratings, look up reviews, or compare recommendations from distant places. They learned instead through experience, through buying, testing, and returning to what worked. A trustworthy seller was worth far more than a slightly cheaper price elsewhere. This preference for reliability shaped medieval markets, creating stable relationships that lasted for years. We still follow this instinct today. We shop at the same grocery store. We buy from favorite online shops. We return to the same hairdresser, mechanic, pharmacy, or cafe. We trust familiar brands because they have proven themselves before. Medieval people shaped this pattern first, long before brand loyalty existed. Their world taught them that money was safest when exchanged within relationships. Another lasting habit from medieval markets was the careful practice of examining goods before buying. Without standardized measurements or consistent quality control, buyers learned to inspect everything: lifting, smelling, weighing, tapping, even listening to the sound of pottery or metal to judge its integrity. These sensory evaluations became natural. People trusted their hands, their eyes, and their intuition. Today, we continue this without thinking. We squeeze fruit gently. We tap melons to hear their sound. We smell herbs or soaps before purchasing. We read labels and check details. We compare items side by side. We test zippers, buttons, or seams. Much of this originates not from modern consumer education, but from centuries of practice in open markets where buyers safeguarded their money through careful observation. Another medieval habit that survived into the modern world is negotiating politely. Haggling was not rude, it was expected, but it was done calmly, respectfully, almost like a quiet dance between buyer and seller. A customer might offer a slightly lower price, the merchant a slightly higher one, and slowly they would meet at a fair amount that satisfied both. Today, in many parts of the world, negotiation still exists, in secondhand markets, car sales, local stalls, and informal settings. Even in places where prices are fixed, negotiation survives subtly through discounts, loyalty programs, seasonal offers, or package deals. The quiet medieval instinct for balancing value still shapes how we think about getting a good price. Returning customers also influence pricing. Sellers often gave better deals to familiar buyers, a gentle reward for loyalty. We see this today in loyalty cards, regular customer discounts, repeat bonuses, or personal pricing for longtime clients. These modern systems mimic medieval behavior almost exactly, structured now, but rooted in human connection. Then there was another important habit: buying locally, not because of sustainability or environmental awareness, but because local goods were fresher, more reliable, and easier to judge. A cheese seller from down the road brought products the buyer recognized. A potter from the village used clay that locals trusted. A weaver from the town used wool from nearby fields. Local commerce was not a trend, it was the backbone of survival. Today, even with global trade, people still prefer local products when possible, local vegetables, local bread, local artisans, local cafes. Because familiarity feels safe and quality feels easier to trust. The comfort we feel in supporting local sellers mirrors the medieval pattern of strengthening community through trade. Medieval buyers also practiced pacing themselves. They rarely spent everything at once. Markets were weekly, sometimes even less frequent, so money had to stretch. People bought essentials first: food, tools, materials, and only after these needs were met did they consider small luxuries. This quiet discipline became part of everyday life and remains visible today in the way people budget, prioritize bills, and separate needs from wants. Another habit tied to fairness was paying immediately. Credit existed informally, but most transactions happened on the spot. Buyers gave coins, sellers gave goods. This direct exchange built clarity. There were no long-term debts, no complicated records, no disputes over delayed payments. The simplicity of immediate payment still shapes modern preferences. Many people feel more comfortable paying right away, clearing balances, or preferring debit over delayed credit, a psychological rhythm that echoes medieval logic. Careful record-keeping emerged from these habits. Merchants began writing down who bought what and for how much. Buyers began tracking their expenses mentally or on small wax tablets. Over time, this developed into more structured bookkeeping, the ancestor of modern receipts, spreadsheets, and accounting systems. But the core idea remains ancient. Understanding where money goes leads to better decisions. Let us return now to the market square, where midday settles over the stalls. A messenger purchases a loaf of bread. A merchant buys wool from a shepherd. A traveler chooses a pot made by a familiar craftsman. Each transaction follows the same quiet patterns: trust, examination, negotiation, confirmation, practiced so consistently over centuries that they became instinctive. The marketplace also shaped social understanding of fairness. Sellers who cheated customers rarely remained successful. Bad reputation spread slowly but effectively. People avoided those who measured dishonestly, substituted poor quality, or raised prices unfairly. Over time, this created an unwritten code. Honest trade earns longevity. Today, consumer reviews, ratings, and recommendations perform the same function, but the core principle, reputation shapes success, has been part of markets since medieval times. One of the most heartwarming habits that survived is the ritual of greeting and thanking. Medieval trade was personal. Buyers and sellers greeted one another warmly, often by name. They exchanged small remarks about weather, harvests, or family. Payments ended with soft words of thanks. Today, even in fast-paced shops, we still expect greetings, appreciation, and polite interaction. This social habit, born in medieval marketplaces, continues to shape how comfortable we feel during purchases. Before leaving the market, imagine one last detail. A buyer stops by their usual fruit stall, purchasing apples for the week. The seller gives an extra apple, a small gesture of goodwill. This tradition of adding a little extra has never vanished. Today it appears as free samples, small bonuses, loyalty gifts, or seasonal treats, all carrying the same warm medieval spirit of generosity. Before the idea of saving money was ever written in guides or taught in lessons, medieval people practiced thrift in a way that felt as natural as breathing. Their world required them to use every resource carefully, not because frugality was fashionable, but because it was essential for survival. Yet the habits they formed through necessity became powerful patterns of behavior that remain with us today. Every time we repair something instead of replacing it, stretch resources a little further, reuse containers, patch clothing, or find a second purpose for an old item, we echo medieval thrift. To understand these habits clearly, imagine stepping into a medieval household as the day begins. The home is modest, built from timber, stone, or wattle and daub, depending on the region. Sunlight filters through a small window, illuminating shelves lined not with decorative objects, but with items carefully arranged for repeated use. Wooden bowls polished by years of hands, metal tools with handles worn, smooth cloth scraps folded neatly for repairs. Nothing in this household exists without purpose. If something breaks, it is not discarded lightly. Instead, it becomes an opportunity to demonstrate skill, creativity, and care. Medieval thrift began with the mindset of preservation. People believed that everything, from clothing to tools, from containers to furniture, held value far beyond the moment of purchase. Items were expected to last for years, even decades. When modern people say they made things to last back then, it's partly true, but only because medieval people made things last through constant upkeep. Clothing, for example, rarely left a household unused. When a tunic developed a tear, it was patched. When a sleeve frayed, it was mended. When the garment became too worn for public wear, it became work clothing. When it tore beyond repair, the fabric was cut into smaller pieces and transformed into cleaning cloths, padding, or wraps for fragile items. Even the smallest scraps were kept, often stored in baskets to use for quilting, stuffing cushions, or reinforcing other garments. This habit of reusing fabric survives today in countless ways: repairing jeans, keeping old t-shirts for cleaning, repurposing worn-out clothes, or saving scrap fabric for crafts. The modern idea of upcycling is simply a contemporary version of an ancient practice. Tools followed a similar path. A broken wooden handle on a hammer or hoe was replaced rather than discarded. Metal edges were sharpened repeatedly, maintained carefully through regular inspection. A single tool might pass through generations, remaining functional through dozens of repairs. Modern people who fix appliances, sharpen knives, maintain garden tools, or repair furniture are practicing direct descendants of medieval thrift. Containers, too, were treated with reverence. Jars, pots, baskets, and barrels were expensive and labor-intensive to produce, so they were cherished. When a basket began to loosen, its weaving was tightened or reinforced. Cracked pottery was mended using techniques like riveting or sealing with natural resins. Wooden containers were scrubbed, dried, and reused countless times. In our world, glass jars used for homemade preserves or reused containers for storage continue this ancient lineage of thrifty practicality. The habit of thrift also extended to food, an area where medieval households excelled in resourcefulness. Every part of an ingredient was utilized. If grain was available in large quantities, it was ground, baked, stored, or preserved for cold months. Vegetables were dried, pickled, or fermented. Meat, when families could afford it, was salted, smoked, or boiled repeatedly until every bit served a purpose. Leftovers were cherished, not forgotten. Broths simmered for days, absorbing flavors from bones and scraps that modern households often throw away. Each of these habits shaped an instinct that lives on, the desire to avoid waste. People today may keep leftovers, freeze food, reuse vegetable scraps for broth, or portion meals carefully, all echoes of medieval necessity. Thrift also influenced how medieval people managed household objects. A broken chair leg was repaired with wooden pegs. A cracked window shutter was patched with cloth soaked in oil to block drafts. Combs, spoons, and bowls were sanded smooth when worn. A pair of shoes with thinning soles was resoled by a cobbler. These repairs often created emotional connections. Objects accumulated stories through their continued use. We still feel this today when we repair something meaningful, like a favorite mug or a cherished piece of furniture. But thrift reached far beyond personal belongings. Communities worked together to preserve shared resources. Wells were maintained collectively. Tools belonging to a household might be borrowed by neighbors. Barns and storage buildings were repaired before winter. These cooperative habits reduced costs and created tighter bonds between families. Modern resource sharing, community gardens, tool libraries, neighborhood lending groups, mirrors this medieval tradition almost perfectly. The idea that sharing reduces expenses and waste is ancient, not modern. Even building materials were reused. When old houses or structures fell into disrepair, stones, timbers, and tiles were salvaged and incorporated into new buildings. Floors were patched with reclaimed wood. Roofs were repaired using repurposed beams. Today, the growing trend of using reclaimed wood or recycled materials in construction nods directly to these medieval practices. One fascinating medieval habit was saving broken or worn items for parts. A broken pot might yield pieces used to line ovens, reinforce walls, or support small objects. A damaged tool might have its metal melted and reshaped into something smaller. Even ashes from the hearth became ingredients in cleaning mixtures or fertilizers for the garden. Every object had a second life, and sometimes a third or fourth. In this way, thrift was not simply frugality. It was a philosophy of continuity. Every household item had a journey, evolving through forms until it reached the end of its usefulness. We still follow similar patterns when we repurpose materials, recycle components, or donate items so they can continue their life elsewhere. Medieval thrift also shaped attitudes toward purchasing. People often asked themselves, do we truly need this? Can we make do with what we already have? Can we repair the old item instead of buying a new one? These questions remain the foundation of modern budgeting advice. The idea of distinguishing between needs and wants, prioritizing practicality, and avoiding impulsive spending all began with medieval households carefully evaluating their limited resources. And yet, despite the necessity of thrift, medieval people didn't view it as a burden. It was simply part of life's quiet rhythm. Repairing, reusing, and maintaining created a sense of accomplishment, a connection to one's belongings, and an appreciation for the work that went into every crafted item. In the evenings, after the day's work ended, families performed small acts of preservation. Someone sharpened a blade. Someone patched a garment. Someone mended a basket. The fire crackled softly, and these gentle tasks fostered reflection and peace. Much like modern people who enjoy mending clothes, restoring furniture, or doing small household fixes as a calming activity. Even when medieval households eventually replaced an item, they did so thoughtfully. They often sold or traded the old one, giving it new purpose. Today, secondhand markets, thrift stores, and online resale platforms continue the cycle of reuse that medieval people understood instinctively. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of medieval thrift is the idea that less can be enough. Medieval families made the most of what they had, not because of philosophy, but because of reality. Over time, this created a cultural appreciation for practical simplicity. Many people today still feel comfort in having fewer but well-cared-for possessions, a quiet lifestyle rooted in deep history. Money habits are rarely born from rules or instructions. Instead, they grow from the rhythm of daily life. In the medieval world, one of the most powerful forces shaping financial behavior was the weekly market day, a steady pulse that organized how people earned, spent, saved, and prepared for the days ahead. And although our world now moves with constant access to shops, online stores, and digital payments, the ancient pattern of budgeting around predictable cycles still influences how we manage money today. To understand this deeply, let us gently step into a medieval village just after sunrise on market day. The air is cool, and the first light falls softly across the rooftops. Villagers have already begun gathering items to bring into town: baskets of vegetables, bundles of wool, clay pots, freshly baked bread, simple tools, and carefully preserved goods from their homes. For many, this day is not only a chance to buy and sell, it is the financial anchor of the entire week. Most medieval families did not spend money randomly throughout the week. They planned around market day with remarkable discipline. They used the days leading up to it to assess what they needed, what they had, and what they could produce or trade. This thoughtful preparation laid the foundation for a habit still common today: budgeting around regular income and shopping cycles. Picture a mother in a medieval household walking through her home the night before market day. She checks her food stores, the barrel of grain, the jars of preserved vegetables, the bundle of herbs hanging to dry. She mentally counts how much wool remains for spinning, how much flour is left for baking, how many tools need repair. These observations form a simple but effective list of what she needs to purchase the next day. This quiet planning resembles modern habits more than one might expect. Today, people check their pantries before grocery shopping. They review their needs before payday. They create lists to avoid overspending. Medieval people began these practices long before budgeting became formal. On market day, villagers walked into the town square with coins they had saved deliberately for this moment. They knew that the money spent today had to last through another week, sometimes longer. This created a natural sense of caution. Instead of impulse buying, purchases were intentional. Coins were counted at every stall, weighed in the mind against needs at home. A family might buy fresh vegetables, perhaps a new pot, maybe a tool handle or spool of thread, but each decision was made with care. This ancient rhythm still shapes our spending today. For many people, payday organizes their financial life. Bills on specific dates, grocery trips on weekends, savings set aside monthly. The habit of aligning spending with predictable cycles echoes the weekly medieval market pattern. Weekly markets also influenced how much families saved. Instead of setting aside coins arbitrarily, they saved with a purpose, to prepare for the next market day. A family might decide to spend only half their earnings at the market and save the rest for future needs. The physical separation of coins into small pouches or jars helped guide these decisions. Modern envelope budgeting systems follow this exact logic, assigning money to categories and spending intentionally based on upcoming needs. Another important habit developed because medieval markets were temporary. Once a week, the square came alive with goods, colors, smells, and voices. But once the day ended, many opportunities to buy or sell disappeared until the next market. This encouraged people to think realistically about what they needed now versus later. People asked themselves questions such as, do we need this today? Will we need it before the next market? Can we wait another week? These questions are remarkably similar to the ones modern people ask when deciding whether to delay a purchase until payday, a sale, or next month's budget. This emphasis on timing also shaped medieval people's understanding of scarcity and opportunity. They learned to buy perishable goods in small amounts to avoid waste. They learned to purchase durable goods only when necessary. They learned to negotiate prices when market competition was high and to accept stable prices when goods were rare. In this way, the weekly market created the foundation for what we now call financial planning. The cycle extended beyond budgeting. People structured their work around market day as well. Farmers harvested vegetables or eggs specifically to sell on that day. Craftsmen planned production schedules to have goods ready. Bakers prepared extra loaves. Shepherds cleaned wool. These preparations created a rhythm of earning and spending that shaped village life. Today, many people still align their work, earnings, and spending around weekly or monthly patterns, even though modern markets operate constantly. The instinct to organize finances and cycles persists because it originated in centuries of predictable medieval routines. Another powerful habit emerged from this rhythm, comparing prices and quality across multiple sellers. Medieval markets brought many vendors together in one place, each offering slightly different products. Buyers walked from stall to stall, checking which vegetables looked fresher, which pottery was sturdier, which cloth felt stronger. They rarely bought from the first place they visited. This behavior survives today in the form of online price comparison, checking multiple stores before purchasing, or researching reviews before buying big items. Medieval people formed this instinct early by seeing competition firsthand and learning that money was safest when spent thoughtfully. Weekly markets also taught people to prioritize needs over luxuries. The first coins typically went toward essentials, grain, vegetables, tools, clothing materials. Only after those were secured did families consider buying something extra, such as a decorative item or a sweet treat. This simple budgeting rule, needs first, wants later, is still the backbone of financial planning today. Another aspect of medieval market culture was the habit of social budgeting. People discussed purchases with family or neighbors before committing. They asked for opinions, shared information about reliable sellers, and exchanged knowledge on what prices seemed fair. Today, people do the same through advice from friends, online reviews, and shared shopping experiences. The social environment of the market also encouraged accountability. When villagers saw familiar faces each week, buyers and sellers formed bonds. If someone overspent one week, neighbors might remind them gently to plan better next time. If a merchant raised prices unexpectedly, word spread. This created a subtle system of checks and balances. A community maintained sense of fairness. The market day structure also influenced how people viewed long-term financial goals. Saving for big purchases often began with setting aside small amounts weekly. A family saving for a new pot or piece of furniture might set aside 1 or 2 coins each market. Over months, the savings accumulated. This habit closely resembles modern sinking funds, saving small amounts regularly for future expenses. Market days reinforced discipline not through rules, but through environment. The rhythm of weekly availability naturally encouraged preparation, prioritization, and restraint. Even today, many people shop weekly, plan budgets around predictable cycles, and align spending with pay schedules. Weekly markets also served emotional functions. They created joy, anticipation, and motivation. People looked forward to the variety of goods, the conversations, the music or entertainment, the chance to see neighbors. This positive association encouraged responsible spending because financial planning felt connected to something meaningful. Today, people feel similar satisfaction when planning shopping trips, browsing markets, or participating in seasonal sales. The emotion behind spending, saving, and preparing has ancient roots. As the medieval market day ended, the square gradually emptied. Stalls were dismantled, goods packed away, and the town returned to its quiet routine. Families walked home with purchases carefully wrapped or carried in baskets. They already thought ahead to next week. What would be needed? What should be saved? What could be earned? This closing ritual shows how deeply the weekly market cycle influenced medieval thinking. Money was not viewed as isolated moments of spending, but as part of a steady flow across time. And though centuries have passed, the rhythm remains unchanged. We still schedule spending. We still prepare for predictable cycles. We still anticipate market days, whether they are literal markets or virtual ones. The medieval weekly market taught us that money is not something to be handled randomly, but something woven into the gentle structure of our lives. In the medieval world, money certainly mattered. Coins exchanged hands in markets, taxes were collected, wages were paid, and savings accumulated slowly in quiet homes. Yet beneath the surface of every transaction flowed something much more powerful, much more fragile, and far more influential than metal: reputation. Trust, reliability, fairness, and honesty acted as a form of invisible currency that shaped not only how people earned and spent, but how they lived, how they interacted, and how their communities sustained themselves. To truly understand this ancient habit, one that still guides nearly every financial decision we make today, we must slow down and imagine life in a world where information traveled by word of mouth, where written records were rare, and where a person's good name could carry more weight than a pouch full of coins. Picture a medieval town as dawn spreads gently across the rooftops. The streets are quiet, still damp with morning mist. Merchants begin setting out their goods: loaves of bread, bolts of cloth, rings of cured meat, handmade tools, small bundles of herbs. As villagers begin to appear, one thing determines which sellers they will approach first. Not price, not location, but reputation. A baker known for honesty will always seek customers first. His bread may cost a coin more, but people are comfortable with him. They know his loaves are fresh, that his measurements are fair, that he treats customers with respect. Reputation acts almost like gravity, drawing people in with gentle but undeniable force. This dynamic existed everywhere. The blacksmith known for durable work never lacked orders. The shepherd respected for truthful dealings sold his wool easily. The potter whose goods rarely cracked received more business than one known for cutting corners. In this world, money flowed toward trust as naturally as rivers flowed toward the sea. Modern people sometimes believe that reputation became important only with the rise of formal businesses, reviews, or branding. But the truth is far older. Medieval communities lived so closely together that a single act, good or bad, could shape perception for years. People remembered who cheated them, who lied, who overcharged, who failed to deliver on promises. They also remembered who was fair, kind, and reliable. This created a financial system rooted in human character rather than complex rules. Trust became a kind of currency more stable than silver. This instinct, deeply shaped by medieval life, still guides us today. We buy from brands we trust. We hire people with solid references. We return to restaurants with good reviews. We leave places that treat us poorly. All of these behaviors reflect the same ancient habit: seeking reliability in a world where money alone cannot guarantee satisfaction. In medieval towns, reputation also protected people from financial risk. Consider a merchant preparing to buy cloth from a weaver. He does not examine every inch. Instead, he relies on the weaver's reputation, perhaps earned over many years, knowing her goods have always been strong, evenly woven, and honestly priced. A single dishonest act would stain her name, making it difficult to rebuild trust. This fragility made reputation precious. It could spread quickly across villages, markets, and towns. A person known for deception might find doors closing wherever they went, no matter how much money they offered. A famous saying of the time reflected this truth: "A coin spins once, a name spins forever." And indeed, Reputation often determined who received opportunities, whose goods sold fastest, and who found support in difficult times. Reputation also influenced borrowing and lending. In communities where banks did not exist for ordinary people, loans happened between neighbors, friends, or merchants. Someone with a history of keeping promises could borrow grain or coins with ease. Someone known to delay payments found it nearly impossible to receive help. This early form of creditworthiness shaped medieval economies long before credit scores or financial records. Families protected their reputation carefully. Parents taught children to speak honestly in markets, to return borrowed tools on time, to fulfill promises, to avoid causing conflict, not only for moral reasons, but because reputation affected every financial aspect of their lives. A family with good standing found better prices, more support, and more stability. A family with poor standing struggled in ways that extended far beyond money. Merchants, too, relied heavily on reputation when traveling between towns. A traveling trader known for fair dealing received hospitality, trust, and safe passage. One with suspicion hanging over him found doors closed, offers less favorable, and opportunities scarce. In a time when roads were unpredictable and travel was physically demanding, reputation acted like a quiet shield, smoothing the way and opening spaces of safety. One interesting aspect of medieval life is how communities publicly maintained reputation. If someone was known for unfair measures, using lighter weights, cutting portions short, or mixing poor quality goods, the community might speak openly about it, causing others to avoid that seller. This informal but powerful accountability system prevented exploitation. People understood that money exchanged in a world of trust held far more value. Even small gestures influenced reputation. A seller adding a little extra to a purchase, a craftsman repairing an item at no cost, a farmer sharing surplus during good seasons. These acts built goodwill that returned many times over. A person with a generous reputation often received support when needed most. Today, businesses that offer excellent customer service or go above and beyond still benefit from this same principle. Reputation shaped relationships between buyers and sellers, but it also shaped relationships between workers and employers. A laborer who showed up on time, worked consistently, and treated others respectfully earned steady wages and repeat employment. A laborer who was careless or unreliable might receive fewer opportunities. In a world with no formal employee contracts, reputation served as the basis for choosing who to hire and who to trust with important tasks. Craft guilds, associations of craftsmen in towns, emerged in part to protect collective reputation. A guild of carpenters, weavers, or toolmakers ensured members followed certain standards. If a single craftsman produced poor work, it threatened the reputation of the entire guild. Modern certification systems, quality control labels, and professional associations reflect this medieval system of shared responsibility. Reputation also shaped how communities handled disputes. If two people disagreed over money or goods, those with strong reputations were often believed more readily. But this was not blind judgment. It was the result of years of observed reliability. A person known for fairness was trusted to act fairly again. A person known for causing trouble often had difficulty convincing others of their version of events. This also influenced trade over long distances. A merchant traveling from one region to another often relied on letters of introduction, handwritten notes from local leaders or respected villagers vouching for his character. These letters functioned much like modern references or credentials. They provided assurance to strangers that the merchant was safe to trade with. Without such assurances, business might never occur. All of these habits, preferring familiar sellers, valuing trustworthy workers, believing reputation over empty promises, avoiding unreliable sources, form the foundation of modern consumer behavior. When someone chooses a brand because of positive reviews, leaves a business after poor service, or makes decisions based on someone's past actions, they are reenacting patterns that medieval people practiced naturally every day. Reputation in medieval society was also tied to longevity. A family whose reputation stayed strong over generations could build prosperity steadily. A merchant with a good name could pass his business to his children with confidence. A craftsman known for skill attracted apprentices eager to learn. In this way, reputation was not just personal, it became a quiet form of inheritance. And it was resilient. Wealth could disappear through illness or bad harvests. Tools could break. Animals could fall ill. Houses could be damaged. But a good reputation, carefully built and consistently practiced, helped rebuild everything else. Communities rallied around families known for kindness and fairness, offering support when needed. That same support was offered far less readily to those who had damaged their reputation. This community-centered understanding of financial life still exists today. Small neighborhoods, local businesses, and even online spaces reward good reputations and distance themselves from the unreliable. Service industries thrive on reviews. Entrepreneurs build brands around personal trust. Individuals with strong reputations receive job opportunities more easily. The medieval truth remains: money flows where trust is strongest. In the medieval world, money did not flow evenly throughout the year. Instead, it rose and fell gently like the rhythm of the seasons, swelling with the harvest, thinning during winter, returning in spring, and shifting again in summer. People earned, saved, and spent according to patterns set not by wages or fixed salaries, but by the land itself. This natural ebb and flow shaped financial habits so deeply that, even today, we unconsciously follow many of the same principles: planning ahead, preparing for lean periods, adjusting spending with changing circumstances, and aligning our financial decisions with predictable cycles. To understand this, let us step quietly into a medieval village where the year begins not on a calendar page, but with the first signs of spring. The air becomes slightly warmer. Birds return to the fields. Farmers begin preparing the soil. Carpentry and construction work increase as roads dry and daylight extends. People who had spent long winter months indoors now move with renewed energy. In this season, spending tends to rise gently. Tools need replacing, seeds must be purchased, and repairs delayed during winter must now be completed. Households look at their savings, accumulated patiently in colder months, and begin using a portion to restart the cycle of productivity. This habit, spending more when the year demands it, mirrors modern life. Today, people spend more during certain periods: holidays, school seasons, warm weather repairs, or predictable annual expenses. Medieval people followed the same instinct, guided by nature rather than paperwork. As spring turns to summer, the land reaches its full pace. Work becomes intense. Crops grow rapidly. Shepherds shear sheep. Craftsmen travel more easily between towns. Markets fill with fresh produce. During this period, income tends to rise. Medieval households often earned the most in summer and early autumn, when produce, wool, and labor were in highest demand. Yet, despite increased income, people rarely spent freely during these months. Instead, they saved deliberately, setting aside coins for the inevitable difficulties of winter. This practice is strikingly similar to modern habits, saving during times of abundance to prepare for times when expenses will rise or income will drop. Summer also brought unexpected costs: broken tools, travel expenses, festival preparations, and market fees. Medieval people learned to anticipate these, adjusting their spending to match the season's demands. Today, we still prepare for seasonal costs: vacations, repairs, school supplies, or unpredictable events tied to weather or opportunity. When summer faded into autumn, the most important season of medieval financial life arrived: the harvest. Autumn was both a celebration and a moment of seriousness. The entire year's stability depended on this season. Families gathered crops, filled storage barrels, prepared dried goods, and assessed how much they had earned. Some began selling surplus at markets. Others kept everything for winter survival. This season required careful budgeting, deciding how much to sell, how much to keep, and how much to save. Many modern people experience a similar cycle during annual bonuses, seasonal work peaks, or farming harvests. Autumn's careful decision-making echoes in end-of-year financial planning today. As the days shortened and the air cooled, medieval life slowed. Winter approached. Winter was the true test of financial discipline. Work opportunities diminished sharply. Fields became quiet. Travel slowed. Many crafts paused. Snow or cold rain made long journeys difficult. Families stayed indoors more often, relying on their autumn planning and summer savings. Money spent in winter had to be used wisely. Essentials came first: warmth, food, tools, and repairs needed to endure the cold months. This period taught medieval people a powerful financial habit that remains vital today, living on reduced income and increased expenses during difficult seasons. People learned to stretch resources, ration savings, and maintain calm during lean times. They did not panic at temporary scarcity because their entire year was built around anticipating it. This rhythm developed naturally. Nobody needed formal budgeting lessons. Nature taught them through repetition. Year after year, households refined their ability to predict needs, adjust spending, and preserve stability. One fascinating habit that emerged from this yearly cycle was the practice of earmarking coins for specific seasons. Families often kept a small pouch reserved exclusively for winter, separate from general savings. They treated this money as untouchable until necessary. Today's emergency funds, winter savings, and seasonal budgets reflect the same ancient instinct. Another important seasonal habit involved buying in bulk during times of abundance. Medieval people purchased large quantities of grain, salted meat, wool, or firewood when prices were lowest, often in late summer or early autumn. These bulk purchases reduced winter expenses and ensured security. Modern warehouse shopping, seasonal discounts, and bulk purchasing follow this same medieval logic. Seasonal work patterns also shaped medieval financial habits. Some people earned income through seasonal jobs, shepherds earning primarily through shearing, carpenters receiving more work in warm months, or travelers trading only during road-friendly seasons. These professions understood irregular income deeply and learned to stretch earnings across the entire year. Today, freelancers, gig workers, farmers, and those with variable incomes use the same habits, planning ahead, saving aggressively during peak seasons, spending cautiously during slow months. Even social habits followed seasonal financial rhythms. Weddings and celebrations were often held after harvest when money and food were most abundant. Repairs to homes and tools were usually postponed until spring. Major purchases happened during seasons associated with higher income. These patterns closely mirror modern tendencies, celebrating during holidays or pay cycles, scheduling repairs in warm months, planning travel when money aligns with opportunity. Communities also supported seasonal financial habits. During winter, neighbors often shared resources, loaned tools, or helped repair homes. These acts of mutual support strengthened community bonds and helped people endure periods of scarcity. Today, this lives on through family assistance, neighborhood cooperation, and shared financial responsibilities during difficult times. The psychological impact of seasonal budgeting was also profound. Medieval people understood that scarcity did not mean failure. It meant the year had reached its quiet, resting phase. This outlook reduced anxiety and replaced fear with acceptance and preparation. The emotional resilience gained from living through cycles of abundance and scarcity helped people remain calm during financial challenges. Even the pace of spending changed with the seasons. In summer and autumn, people made practical purchases for work and survival. In winter, spending shifted toward preservation, repairs, fuel, and essentials. Spring spending often focused on renewal, seeds, tools, and materials for growth. The rhythm of the seasons became the rhythm of money. As we reflect on these habits, it becomes clear that our modern financial behaviors, saving for slow months, adjusting spending during high-need periods, planning around holidays, or seasonal bills, building emergency funds, anticipating cycles, are not recent innovations. They are echoes of medieval life, carried forward through generations. Today, even with climate-controlled homes, global markets, and digital tools, our financial choices still unconsciously follow natural patterns. We save when we can, prepare for lean times, and align spending with predictable cycles. Medieval households lived by these rhythms because they had to. We live by them because they still make sense. Long before spreadsheets, notebooks, ledger books, or digital banking apps existed, medieval people managed their finances with a kind of quiet precision that grew not from written documentation, but from memory, habit, and the slow rhythm of repeated tasks. Their budgeting was intimate, instinctive, and deeply connected to daily life. Modern budgeting systems, recording expenses, mentally tracking income, allocating money for different purposes, reviewing finances regularly, all have roots in these early medieval practices, shaped in households where every coin mattered and nothing could be overlooked. To understand how medieval budgeting truly worked, Let us step gently into a small cottage at the end of an ordinary day. The sun is setting. A soft glow fills the room as the fire burns low. A family gathers at a wooden table, simple but smooth from years of use. Someone empties a small pouch of coins onto the table. The coins clink softly, forming a small pile that represents the day's earnings or leftovers from market purchases. It isn't much, perhaps a few copper coins, maybe a silver one if the day was especially fortunate. But it is enough to begin the quiet mental work that medieval people practiced instinctively. There is no paper to write on. Parchment is too expensive for daily use. Ink is precious. Instead, medieval budgeting relies on the mind, on the ability to remember, categorize, and plan through routine. The first step in this early budgeting process is assessment. The person sorting the coins knows exactly how much was earned earlier in the week, how much was spent at the market, how much was saved for winter, and how much must remain untouched. They do not need written lists or calculations because these numbers are woven into the pace of their life. Just as modern people remember certain recurring expenses without checking a list, rent, groceries, fuel, medieval people remembered what their survival required. They separate the coins mentally. Some will go toward immediate needs, flour, vegetables, oil, or salt. Some toward longer-term plans, repairing the roof, buying wool, preparing for winter. Some will be added to the household savings jar or pouch. This act mirrors modern budgeting categories: essentials, goals, savings, even though the medieval version is entirely unwritten. To prevent overspending, medieval households developed a powerful habit: visual accounting. Rather than tracking numbers on a page, they tracked coins physically. The coins on the table represented all that could be spent in the coming days. When they were gone, spending stopped. This tangible limitation created discipline far more naturally than any written rule. We can see traces of this practice today in methods like the envelope system, cash budgeting, or even digital categories that separate spending into visible groups. Medieval budgeting thrived because people saw their money directly, touched it daily, and watched it diminish or grow with each decision. In many homes, different pouches or containers acted as early budget categories. A small jar might hold coins for household repairs. A pouch tied to a beam might contain money saved for winter. Another pouch might hold market money, the weekly spending allowance. Though there were no written labels, each container had a purpose understood by everyone in the household. This multi-container system resembles contemporary savings jars, bank subaccounts, digital wallets, or even budgeting apps that divide money into different goals. Medieval people invented these divisions long before financial tools became formalized. Memory played a key role in maintaining the budget. Medieval people remembered prices with remarkable accuracy. They knew the cost of grain last season, the usual price of wool, the amount needed to buy a tool, or the typical cost of a loaf of bread. These remembered values guided decisions each day and prevented overspending. Today, people often rely on similar memory-based budgeting, recalling monthly bills, typical grocery totals, or regular expenses without needing to check notes. Another important aspect of medieval budgeting was mental forecasting. Households constantly projected their needs into the future. They thought ahead to the next market day, the next season, the next repair, or the next winter. They estimated how long their coins would last and adjusted their actions accordingly. This was budgeting not as a written exercise, but as a continuity of thought, always active in the background. Modern budgeting systems still depend on forecasting, estimating future income, costs, and savings needs. But medieval forecasting was rooted in natural cycles and lived experience, making it both instinctive and reliable. Households also used collective knowledge. Budgeting was rarely a solitary task. Families discussed their financial situation verbally. Someone might remind the household that the grain barrel was half empty, that the roof needed patching soon, or that next month required purchasing wool for winter clothing. These conversations acted as real-time budget updates, keeping everyone informed and responsible. Today, families continue this tradition, discussing finances openly, planning purchases together, assigning shared responsibilities, and reviewing expenses as a group. A fascinating element of medieval budgeting was the way people calculated value over time. They weighed purchases not only by cost, but by durability. For example, a sturdy tool cost more, but would last years. A poorly made tool cost less but required frequent replacement. This mindset, evaluating long-term cost instead of short-term price, remains central to wise spending today. Medieval budgeting also included non-monetary planning. Many goods could be substituted with labor instead of money. If a family needed a basket, they might weave one. If they needed repairs, they did them themselves. If they lacked certain ingredients, they adjusted recipes. Budgeting involved creativity as much as financial control. This approach taught medieval people to think broadly. Money was not the only resource. Time, skill, and community support also mattered. Modern budgeting often includes similar thinking: do-it-yourself repairs, cooking at home, using available skills to reduce expenses. One of the most profound budgeting habits was reviewing finances daily. Medieval people touched their money every day. They counted it, sorted it, checked it, and used it. This daily contact created constant awareness, the foundation of all budgeting success. When people visualize their money regularly, they make better decisions. Today's equivalent is checking bank balances often, reviewing spending apps, or monitoring expenses. The habit feels modern, but its roots are deeply medieval. Medieval people also tracked debt carefully. If someone owed a neighbor a few coins or received a loan of grain, this debt was remembered and repaid as soon as possible. Keeping mental records of obligations became part of budgeting. This kept communities stable and relationships strong. Modern people do the same, tracking bills, loans, and responsibilities through calendars or apps. But the instinct comes from centuries of spoken agreements and careful memory. In larger towns, merchants used primitive bookkeeping methods. Some kept tally sticks, pieces of wood with notches representing transactions. Others used wax tablets to record temporary notes. But even these systems relied heavily on memory and trust. Written budgeting grew directly out of these early tools. One of the most interesting budgeting practices was planning purchases around predictable life events. Medieval households budgeted for seasonal needs, weddings, repairs, livestock purchases, tools, clothing, taxes, or fees. These recurring expenses formed the backbone of budgeting, much like recurring bills do today. People saved gradually, often over months or years, placing coins into small pouches set aside for specific events. This system directly parallels modern sinking funds, saving gradually for future expenses so the cost feels manageable rather than overwhelming. At the heart of medieval budgeting was an understanding that money flowed in cycles, not straight lines. It ebbed and grew. Some weeks offered abundance, others offered little. By tracking these patterns mentally, medieval people built resilience. They understood how to tighten their spending, when to loosen it, and how to keep stability even when life was uncertain. Their budgeting was not perfect, but it was deeply human, shaped by observation, habit, memory, and experience. It required attention, patience, and cooperation, the same qualities needed for budgeting today. As we reflect on these practices, it becomes clear that modern budgeting tools, apps, charts, planners, envelopes, and categories are simply refined versions of medieval systems. The core behaviors remain unchanged: tracking income, anticipating expenses, separating money for different purposes, reviewing regularly, and using resources wisely. As our calm journey through medieval money habits comes to an end, a soft truth settles over everything we have explored. Even though the world has changed in ways medieval people could never have imagined, the way we think about money, the instincts, the rhythms, the quiet decisions, remains deeply connected to their everyday lives. We still count carefully, just as they did at simple wooden tables. We still save a little at a time, setting coins aside for tomorrow. We still return to sellers we trust, valuing reputation more than price. We still reuse, repair, and preserve what we own. We still plan our spending around predictable cycles: weeks, seasons, paydays. We still divide money into categories, even in digital form. We still protect our resources with the same instinct for security. Beneath modern technology, beneath banking systems and budgeting apps, runs a timeless thread, a kind of quiet, ancient wisdom passed from hand to hand, generation to generation. Medieval families, without charts or calculators, learned to manage money through patience, habit, and thoughtful observation. And those gentle practices created the foundation for nearly every financial behavior we follow today. Their world was slower, quieter, and more fragile, but their financial decisions were steady and wise. They learned to make the most of what they had, to prepare for uncertainty, to trust good reputation, and to count every coin with intention. We carry those lessons with us, often without noticing, in every budget we plan, every purchase we consider, every savings goal we pursue. Thank you for joining this peaceful journey tonight, for drifting through the lives of ordinary people whose simple habits shaped the modern world in ways they never saw. If this calm exploration helped you relax or taught you something new, please remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about which medieval habit surprised you the most. Your support keeps these quiet bedtime histories alive. Sleep well, and until the next gentle story, good night.